title of the article was, I Was a Lady Hard Hat. Of course, this was back in the late 60s, early 70s, when women were not in those job roles. So I went back to Tennessee that summer, and I told a friend of mine, I said, yeah, about this article I read. I said, this sounds like fun, sounds like a lot of money. So I talked her into going with me, and we went in search of a construction job. So we went down to the employment office, and much to the chagrin of the young lady that was trying to place us in employment, we insisted that we wanted to get into the construction business. And she kept trying to talk us into office jobs and different things of that sort. And we said, no, we want to do this. So we could go on the job site, and everybody would kind of stand around and gawk at us, and occasionally they'd come up and say, well, we understand that the employment office made you guys take this job. And we said, oh, no, it wasn't like that. We actually had to persuade them to let us apply for the job. I was with Dade City PD for 2 years, and then I went on to the sheriff's office for another 4. On that particular evening, I was just driving through. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and I noticed a couple of lights up ahead. In an area where there should not have been any lights. And I thought, well, I should investigate. And at that point, I thought, okay, I've driven into a plane landing for a drug deal. Mm-hmm. So I immediately threw my cruiser into reverse and retreated to a safer distance. My shotgun was my weapon of choice in those days, so I grabbed it out of the rack and racked one into the chamber. And as I came in contact with other female officers through the years that were coming up, I would always share with them what had worked for me. And it was that ability to talk and reason with people. If you find yourself in a situation, you just have to figure out how to acquire the knowledge that you don't have when you took the leap. My motivation was to do what Margaret wanted to do, and not be limited by what society said Margaret could do or what she couldn't do. You've got to decide what you want to do, and then you've got to make up your mind that you're going to do it. That failure is really not an option. You can decide that you're going to succeed, or you can just wither it away and give up. You don't fail, you just give up. So I'm not going to throw in the towel if I can see a way to succeed. And I think that's what people need to learn, because I see too many people quit too early. But you've got to be willing to stay with it and analyze constantly. Why isn't it working? What can I do? What do I need to do? What do I not know? You can't just put your open sign in the door and wait. I love Dade City. I am a strong proponent of Dade City, and I believe that Dade City now possesses attributes that could make it a very thriving tourist destination, because we still have that old charm.
Welcome to The Art of Business. I'm your host, Eric Baker. I sit down with entrepreneurs right here in Dade City and the surrounding areas to find out about their backgrounds, how they built their businesses, and what their secrets for success are. Today's episode is sponsored by Lanky Lassie Shortbread. Order online, ships nationwide, llshortbread.com. Today, I'm joined with Miss Margaret Angell. She is the owner of Angel Tea Room and Heavenly Treasures Gift Shop. They are located at 37847 Meridian Avenue in Dade City, Florida. You can also find them online at angeltearoom.com. Margaret is an entrepreneur, a college graduate, a business owner, a writer, a former law enforcement officer, a private investigator, the president of the Dade City Merchants Association. She has her restaurant in downtown Dade City. And to quote Madonna Jervis Wise from her book, Trailblazing Women of Tampa Bay, Margaret is a trailblazer who provides a modern day inspiration for girls seeking non-traditional careers. Margaret is an incredibly impressive person. She is the literal definition of the word entrepreneur and is the living embodiment of the phrase role model. She's lived and is living an extremely interesting life, and I'm thrilled to have the chance to tell her story. And she's got quite the story to tell, and we do talk about all of it. But before we just jump into it, Margaret and I talk about cats?
I adore cats. They're very fascinating creatures.
Yeah.
Greatly underestimated by people who have not had cats, but greatly appreciated by those who have.
Yes, ma'am. Now, do you have 2 or 3?
I have 3 boys, 3 males that live in the house with me, and then I have 3 girls that live in an apartment of their own out back.
Okay. And so I see Nicholas, Whitey, and Junior. I found those.
JR.
JR. Okay.
Yeah.
And so JR just showed up at your door at Christmas time.
JR just appeared on the doorstep. I ran home on an errand from the tea room, and lo and behold, there was little tiny JR wandering around. And of course, I tried to check with the neighbors to see if anybody had lost him, and with no luck, nobody claimed him. And so I took him in and gave him a home, and he's now one of the boys.
Fantastic. And what's so? What about your other cats? Were they adopted? Did they just show up too?
Or? Nicholas is the oldest. When I was active with my private investigation agency, we had an office downtown, and I had a colleague that worked with me, and she also loved cats. There was a cat that roamed around in the complex that would go from door to door, looking, as cats will, looking for a handout. Mm-hmm. My colleague gave that cat a name. Her name was Agatha, obviously connected to the PI business, the investigative business. So Agatha had babies, and Nicholas was her son. Mm. So I took him home to live there.
Yeah.
We joked about putting a sign in the window right after Agatha had her babies that we had babies to adopt to a good home, but they had to pass a background investigation. We laughed about that, but we found homes without going to those extremes.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's the way Nicholas came to be. And my other cat, Whitey, was part of a litter that was the offspring of my neighbor, who had her kittens over on my property. And of course, the neighbor wasn't interested in dealing with the kittens, so I ended up with them.
Yeah.
And Whitey and his older brother, who is now deceased, would stay with the babies. One of them would go out, roam around or whatever, but there was always one of the older boys that would stay with the babies after the mother was killed. She got killed by a car. So anyway, Whitey was part of the cat house population until he became ill, and then I brought him inside, nursed him back to health, and of course he refuses to give up the air conditioning now and go back to his former residence.
Yeah.
But that's how those 3 boys came to be.
I love it. I love it myself. I have a little girl. She's hiding around here somewhere. She's a scaredy cat.
Yeah, I saw the bed. I figured there was...
she's here somewhere. Okay, so Margaret, let's start at the beginning here. And I want to take the time to get to know you on a personal level a little bit. So we'll set that foundation.
Okay.
So I understand that you're from Dade City. You're a true native.
Well, I was 8 years old when I came to Dade City, when we moved to Dade City. So gotcha. I grew up here, but I wasn't born here.
Yes, ma'am. And so you went to Pasco High School?
I did.
Okay. What were you into back in high school?
Well, I was in a college prep program in just your average everyday student activities. I was kind of shy. I actually was a very shy person until I got into law enforcement. Okay. And of course that changed everything. But nothing, nothing really outstanding as far as...
Any clubs sports you played?
I'm not a sports person.
Okay.
I'm the bookworm type.
Yeah, sure. A member of the book club or something? Or?
I don't recall anything about the book club.
Okay, okay.
Just pretty shy, pretty quiet, pretty reserved. I usually was the number 2 person academically speaking.
Okay.
I would shy away from the limelight. So I have a few things that mischievous things that I got into, but I probably should not reveal those at this particular point in time.
Okay, I won't pry then. Okay, so do you come from a large family, many brothers and sisters?
No, I have a sister and a half brother.
Okay.
And
are they local here?
Yes, they are.
Okay, perfect. And so after high school, you went on to study at East Tennessee State University.
That is correct.
Okay,
yes.
So what did you study at ETSU?
Well, I was in a pre-law program, and my goal at that point in time was to become a lawyer. So my studies were geared around that.
Okay.
And,
Okay. Gotcha. And so did you work during college? I think you had mentioned to me something about a hard hat or construction or something.
Okay. That was not during college.
Okay.
I did work. I did not have the financial resources to just go and enjoy college. So I took a year off between my junior and senior year. I came back to Dade City. I had summer jobs with the local law firm. So I came back. They gave me a job, and I spent a year working. I worked with Mr. Gibbs. He was the assistant public defender back in those days, and learned tremendous amount of information from him. I owe him a great debt of gratitude. Taught me many, many things about the law. And then, of course, when that year was over, I went back and finished up my degree. And during my last year in college, they had started the law enforcement program. So I was on electives at that point, so I took mostly classes that were related to that. So that kind of got me set on the direction that I ended up going into law enforcement.
Okay, gotcha.
But,
okay, and so what was that hard hat?
Okay, the hard hat came later.
Okay.
I'm an avid reader, and I get inspired by what I read.
Yeah.
And I was on a little plane jaunt and killing time, and was reading a magazine article, and the title of the article was "I Was a Lady Hard Hat." Of course, this was back in the late 60s, early 70s, when women were not in those job roles. So I read this article about a woman in Washington, D.C., who had become a hard hat, a construction job, and she talked about the money she made and so forth. And I thought, oh, well, that sounds exciting. So I spent about 3 years between college and my law enforcement career actually working as a scale operator for Evans Packing at the time. And we would have the summers off. So I would always go back to Tennessee to hang out with family and college friends. And so I went back to Tennessee that summer, and I told a friend of mine, I said, yeah, about this article I read. I said, this sounds like fun, sounds like a lot of money. So I talked her into going with me, and we went in search of a construction job.
Yeah.
So we went down to the employment office, and much to the chagrin of the young lady that was trying to place us in employment, we insisted that we wanted to get into the construction business. And she kept trying to talk us into office jobs and different things of that sort. And we said, no, we want to do this. So actually, we were able to get a job. And I worked with a construction company. We did commercial concrete jobs. And I think I was probably there for about 3-4 months. Yeah. And then it was time to come back to Dade City and go back to my real job.
Yeah.
But it was fun. I enjoyed it.
And you were one of the only women that were doing it?
We were the only 2 women that were out there.
Yeah.
And
trailblazing.
We could get on a job site, and those were big commercial job sites. I mean, we were pouring concrete for factories and things like that.
Yeah.
So we could go on the job site, and everybody would kind of stand around and gawk at us, and
yeah,
occasionally they'd come up and say, well, we understand that the employment office made you guys take this job. And we said, oh, no, it wasn't like that. We actually had to persuade them to let us apply for the job.
Yeah. But, so you wanted you didn't want the office job. You wanted to do the other thing.
I wanted to. The article was so inspiring. I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And we did.
Yeah.
And it was fun.
Okay. I love it. I love that. Okay. And then so you worked in law enforcement and for the sheriff's office. Now, you kind of touched on that a little bit with Mr. Gibbs and how you kind of got involved. Mm-hmm. And I also read something about Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. So can you kind of talk about how you initially got involved in your interest in law enforcement?
Well, it was a process, and it began when I was very young, reading the Hardy Boy and Nancy Drew books. And again, as I said earlier, I am very influenced by what I read. And I would read about their adventures, and I would go out and try to have adventures of my own. And this was when I was in my early teens, 14, 15. So the seed was there. As far as solving mysteries and crime and that sort of thing. So it just kind of progressed from that point. Okay.
And how long were you a police officer for?
I was with Dade City PD for 2 years, and then I went on to the sheriff's office for another 4.
Okay, wow.
So I had a total of 6 years in law enforcement.
And when I first started talking to you and I came over to your restaurant, we chatted for a little bit, you told me a story about a 500-pound marijuana bust. Really interesting story. I was hoping you could maybe share that with us again.
Well, I think you're referring to one of the situations that I just happened to find myself in, just by happenstance. I was patrolling down in the Zephyr Hills area one evening, and late at night, well, it was actually an early October night, cool, crisp night, which I later learned was ideal for small aircraft to get maximum lift, to get back up off the ground, which would prove significant in this particular case. But I was just minding my own business, riding around, checking, looking for any suspicious activity. And it was the area off of Highway 54, where Fox Ridge subdivision is now. And they had laid the asphalt, put in some of the structure, the infrastructure for the subdivision, but had not really gotten too far with it. And there was a long strip of pavement that had no electrical lines or any houses or anything at all there. So it was a perfect location for a clandestine plane landing. But anyway, on that particular evening, I was just driving through. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and I noticed a couple of lights up ahead in an area where there should not have been any lights. And I thought, well, I should investigate. And I had a series of thoughts that went through my mind at the time. First was that there had been equipment, heavy equipment out there, and that someone had been tampering with it, left the lights on. As I got closer, the lights began to move farther apart. Then I began to think that it was a couple of motorcycles that were there, maybe going to drag race on that long strip or whatever. So I continued on, again, mentally processing different scenarios until I got to a certain point, and I realized that it was the portable lamps that were used for setting up a clandestine runway. And at that point, I thought, okay, I've driven into a plane landing for a drug deal. Mm-hmm. So I immediately threw my cruiser into reverse and retreated to a safer distance. My shotgun was my weapon of choice in those days, so I grabbed it out of the rack and went into the chamber. Of course, by this time I had radioed that I had stumbled upon something. And I had help coming, but they were a good distance away. I mean, Pasco was pretty rural back in those days. So I waited until the lieutenant arrived, and then we went into the scene. We found that there was a couple of vehicles behind those lights, aircraft radio, portable radio, things of that sort, so we knew that what was about to happen. As it turned out, I was sent out of the area with the marked cruiser, and the plainclothes lieutenants came in to wait. They thought perhaps it was just being set up, that it hadn't actually happened yet. I had a zone partner who worked very well with me on things of that sort, so we were very close to the little airport that's there at North Tampa. So he went over to the airport to check to see if there was any activity occurring over there. And lo and behold, there was. There was a plane that had just landed, a little twin engine. And he made contact, talked with the pilot and the fellow that was coming to pick him up. And it turned out that we had a new dispatcher on that night at the sheriff's office who was not well-versed in running tail numbers for aircraft through NCIC. So there was a delay, and during that delay, my zone partner allowed the pilot to leave because he had no reason to detain him at that point. And it turns out there was a connection between the plane registration and one of the vehicles that was at the clandestine site. So at that point, we knew that the plane had already made its rounds. So upon further inspection, we discovered that there were some drag marks across the wing, which led us to believe that they had unloaded, and as it turned out, they did. We began to search both sides of the North Tampa airport. We were at the airport at this point, and found the duffel bags of the marijuana stashed over a ways off the runway. So at that point, the plan was to stake out the stash and see if we could nab the folks that came back to pick it up. So Greg, my zone partner, and I were elected to do that. And of course, the lieutenants went down to the hotel where they could drink hot coffee and, and leave us out there. So to make the long story short, it was a while, but we had made a plan, and a good plan, I think. And so we waited, and then after a while, we saw someone coming along up through along the runway through the lights, and he checked out the area, and we moved in when he grabbed a couple of duffel bags, and when he came back, we moved in to make the arrest. Thinking that he would halt, which was a mistake. He did not halt. So the only time I ever discharged a firearm during my career was that night. I wasn't shooting to hit him. I was just trying to make him hit the ground and stop.
Scared him.
Didn't happen. He ran that much faster. But we eventually did capture him. And of course we had a lot of extra law enforcement personnel because it was shift change time, which was perfect for us, but not so good for them because we had a lot of manpower out there. So we got the marijuana. We got the guy that had come to pick it up. There were a couple of guys that had been at the clandestine site that got away, and the pickup driver got away that was ferrying him back and forth. The case eventually was dismissed because the evidence somehow got tampered with after it was in the custody of the property custodian. But it was a great adventure for Greg and I and everybody concerned.
Sure.
But
and the airplane, you said that you guys were able to confiscate?
The sheriff confiscated the aircraft and used it in his with his resources for a number of years. After that, we got the plane.
Okay.
Got the plane, we got the drugs, but we didn't get the guys.
Didn't get the guys, okay.
Or we got the guys, but the court turned them loose.
Okay, and so you're also a private investigator. You run your own firm, in fact, Angell Investigative Services. You're the agency director. I believe you started that back in 1982, so it's going strong for over 40 years. It's extremely impressive. How did you get started in the private investigation area? Well,
of course, going back to my love for mysteries and solving them and that sort of thing, it became apparent in law enforcement that there was an element of politics involved. We got bounced around from one department to another, and I really just wanted to solve crimes and stay with something. So I began to get a little bit disgruntled. I love being in law enforcement. I love the thrill of being out there on patrol and interacting with people and that sort of thing. But there came a time that I really wanted to stay with a case long enough to see it solved. And I began to realize that the only way that was going to happen, that I would have the freedom to go across jurisdictional boundaries, to go wherever I wanted to go to pursue a lead, that I was going to have to go into a private practice.
Okay.
And of course, it never occurred to me to go to work for somebody else. Just the only idea I had was to start my own agency. So I had a fellow that was a volunteer with the sheriff's office that would come out and ride as we would have what we call auxiliarymen or volunteers, civilian volunteers that would ride, and he had an interest as well. And he had actually signed up for a correspondence course a number of years prior to our meeting. So we got out his old books and we went through it, and for a year, I planned my private investigation agency. And when the time came, I turned in my resignation and jumped into it, much to the chagrin of a lot of people who thought I was foolish. They thought I was leaving a job with benefits, security, and all of that. And it was what I wanted to do, and
you went for it.
I went for it.
Yeah. Now, were there a lot of women police officers, private investigators back in those times?
Well, I think there probably were a lot more female private investigators in that period of time.
Okay.
when I went to Dade City PD, I was actually the second female officer that had been hired.
Oh,
I was the
wow.
first one that actually stuck with it.
Okay.
The other one, I think, resigned after a couple of months.
Gotcha.
And then I came along, and so I was actually the first to stay with it.
Yeah.
And then when I went over to the sheriff's office, I think there were 7 of us that came in around that same time.
Sure.
Because there was Zephyr Hills had hired their first female officer, Karen Collins. Karen went over with me at the same time to the sheriff. And then there were a couple of ladies that were already employed by the sheriff's office in communications and various other departments who had completed the police academy and were now ready to be certified law enforcement officers. Okay. So I think at that point, I think the sheriff ended up with hiring about 7 of us coming in at the same time from various different directions.
Yeah. And so what was that like, entering a male-dominated field at that time? I mean, I'm assuming a lot of machismo that you had to dice through and things, right?
Well, you did. You certainly did. And you had it from the fellow officers, and you had it from the public. With your officers, once they worked with you and realized that you brought to the table something that wasn't already there, such as that gentle touch. Of course, law enforcement was very different back then. Probably much more effective than it is today, in my opinion. But each time you went to a new squad, you would have to prove yourself, basically.
Sure.
And of course, there were, the silly concerns. We'll have to watch what we say. We can't use our language the way we do when we're around guys. How is she going to handle a situation? How is she, are we going to have to take care of her while we're trying to deal with our job, that sort of thing.
Sure.
So once they worked with you and realized that you could do things, you could get the job done. You just didn't necessarily do it with brawn. You did it a different way.
Yes, ma'am.
And as I came in contact with other female officers through the years that were coming up, I would always share with them what had worked for me. And it was that ability to talk and reason with people.
Okay.
You can always fight. You can always do that if words fail you. But I always like to approach a situation from listening, talking, and reasoning, and it worked the majority of the time. And as I worked with the guys, they began to recognize that. And they were there in case we had to fight, but they would also stand down and let you try to reason a situation to a conclusion without it getting violent as well.
Yeah, awesome.
And then, of course, you'd run into the public who would... I think the first day I was out in uniform, I had a gentleman accuse me of taking a job away from a man because I was there. I would have guys that would come up and talk to the volunteer guy instead of to me and ask him how he liked working with the female. And I would always say, he'd say, well, why don't you ask her? And I'd say, yeah, why don't you ask me how I like working with a volunteer?
Yeah, right, sure.
But that sort of thing. And then, of course, there'd be a few things, which I won't go into, that you would have conversations with them about. But
yes, ma'am.
And you say, women talk about things, too, that you would not be comfortable with. So we just have to figure out how to respect each other here and so forth. But all in all, I think it worked because we showed the guys that women could bring to the table something that had been missing.
Yeah.
And anytime there was a child involved or a rape victim or someone of that nature of a situation, they always call for one of us to come.
Yes, ma'am.
And we could gently move them through the emotional aspects of what had happened.
Sure. Yeah.
But,
yeah. An absolute trailblazer. I love this. So, in your PI firm, what type of cases would you work on?
Well, we had probably about 18 or 20 different types of investigations that we listed on our letterhead as doing. We would, of course, you always get your domestics, your cheating spouses. which involves investigation and surveillance. We did a lot of workers' comp fraud investigations.
Okay.
I would do asset locations and those would come into play in a variety of different ways. I did a lot of court-appointed criminal cases. And we would do automobile accident investigation, go out, talk to witnesses, take photographs, that sort of thing, take statements.
Okay.
Missing persons.
Yeah.
We had just about at least one of just about everything during the time, but a lot of it was in the criminal field,
Okay.
the civil field, or in the domestic area.
Gotcha. And those were a lot more fun for you than, from what I understand, than the general law enforcement, sheriff's office?
Yes, because, you had the freedom to solve the case. You didn't have to write a report, turn it in, and forget it, and
Yeah.
move on,
Yes, ma'am.
which was what the way that law enforcement is structured.
Yeah.
There were some times that you would follow up on something if it was immediately following the incident, and I had a few of those. I was very lucky, very, very lucky. A good example of that is we get called for an automobile theft case or something. And I caught on to this early on. The fellow would be out drinking. He would end up leaving his car or getting too intoxicated to drive. Somebody would offer to drive him home, and then they would drop him off, and they'd take his car, which not with the intent of stealing it, but just for convenience, on to their house, with the idea, I guess, that they would hook up the next day and so forth. Well, around the second time I encountered that, I said, okay, same scenario here. I'm hearing this. So I would always say, where were you drinking? I would go there. I would run the tag numbers of any vehicles that looked like they'd been left overnight. I'd go to that address, and lo and behold, there was this car.
Yeah.
So little things like that were the kind of investigative things.
Yeah.
I wanted to use my brain, really.
Yes, ma'am.
You
Sure.
wanted to use your intelligence of solving these things instead of just dealing with bar fights or traffic stops or
Yes, ma'am.
whatever. That was it. Yeah.
What was anything really notable? Any big stories that stand out to you from that one story? Holy cow, that one! Or just do you have any big stories from?
Well, during the 6 years I was in law enforcement, there were a lot of things. I spent the Memorial Day weekend once up in I'm trying to think of the name of the little town. We were waiting for a ship to come in with a drug shipment, and it involved a multi-agency task force. And after my Fox Ridge International story, as I like to refer to it, the sheriff put me in the Special Enforcement Unit for a period of time. And it was in that capacity that I was sent as a representative, one of the two representatives for Pasco, up to Arapahoe was the name of the place. So we were up there with a group of officers from all over the state. We had Tampa PD had been running a wiretap, had intercepted some communication about a ship that was bringing in some marijuana. And, of course, Fish and Game was there. Hernando County was there because Arapahoe was technically in their jurisdiction. They tried to cover all the jurisdictions because we had no idea exactly at what point the offload site would be. So I was involved in that. We were there over that Memorial Day weekend. The ship finally did come in and offloaded, 2,000 pounds of marijuana, I believe it turned out to be.
Wow.
That was a pretty big case. It was fun.
Sure.
There was a funny thing about that. We had, and they were hauling offloading the marijuana and hauling it away in rock trucks.
Okay.
So I was teamed up with a guy that spoke. He was from Hernando. Spoke Spanish because everything was going on in Spanish, and unfortunately I don't speak Spanish. But anyway, our job was to take a CB radio and jam the signal after we took the first truck down, because we knew that the truck driver would alert the subsequent drivers. And so our job was to jam the signal. It didn't go at all as planned. It began to unravel. The plan did, but exercise went down very successfully. It just didn't go the way we planned it. Bad guys were trying to come across the bridge at Arapica, and the first officers would stop them, arrest them, but didn't want to have to stop the action. They didn't want to miss anything by dealing with the prisoner. So the first person would turn, here, take this prisoner, and they'd turn it over and then they'd run on toward where the action was going on. Yeah. So we're going through all of this. I mean, there must have been about 4 or 5 until we finally got to the poor jailer who was there just because he wanted to be in on the action, and he ended up with the prisoners, and the rest of us kept, rushing to the offload site.
Right.
And I think there were probably, if my memory serves me correctly, about 15 guys that were there, bad guys that were there to deal with the marijuana.
Yeah.
There was a money guy from Miami in his little MAC-10 machine gun. Okay. Nobody shot at anybody, but...
Well, I was going to ask, have you ever been shot at in any of these things?
No.
Okay, because those are huge busts.
They are huge.
Disrupting massive amounts of money. You would think that you'd be... But no, okay.
Yeah, not in those days.
Okay.
But anyway, so the bad guys all jumped in the water when they realized that the good guys were surrounding them.
Yeah.
Of course, we were all in plain clothes, so we had little armbands so that we didn't shoot each other. But so then, of course, the fish and wildlife guy came in with the airboat, and the heads started popping up out of the water and surrendering. Yeah. So we rounded up the whole gang, got the whole gang. Wow. The only thing that they didn't do is they didn't get the ship. There was a Coast Guard screw up that let the ship get away.
Oh,
but
man.
we got the marijuana, we got the bad guys. We had a thrilling weekend.
Now, when they went to court, did they?
I don't know.
Oh, you didn't know on that one.
It went on to a different jurisdiction.
Gotcha.
But,
okay.
Yeah, I don't recall following it at all. If I did, I don't even know who they were. They were just all.
Gotcha. Okay.
Hispanic.
Awesome. Yeah. I love it. I'm inclined to ask you if you have any other stories you want to tell from back in is there anything else that stands out that you want to share from back in those days?
There were many
such
cases that came up. It was just, you never knew what your day was gonna be like.
Yes, ma'am.
And in Pasco County back in those days was very rural. It was very ripe for drug smuggling.
Okay.
Very, very ripe. We had these small airports. We had this coastline. We had wide open fields. I wasn't involved in this particular case, but we had a DC-10, or DC-8, I'm sorry, that sat down in a pasture off of Highway 52. Got mired in the mud, couldn't get back up, but there was just drug smuggling going on all around.
Okay.
But it made for excitement.
Yes, ma'am.
But
okay, I love it. Now, and I understand that you're also quite the writer as well.
Well, I've got one more career planned.
Do you really?
And that will be to try my hand at writing.
Fiction, nonfiction?
Fiction, probably. Most people think I'll write about my experiences, but I will not. That will not be my subject matter.
Do you want to reveal it, or is it kind of a secret?
No, it's not. It's more of a philosophical type writing.
Okay.
Just
about life,
observing various different things.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. I believe that the children's fairy tale, the Cinderella story, could be applied to real life. It's not just a children's story. It's going with the glass slipper, as the prince did, looking for the foot that it fit, is like finding your niche in life, finding what really fits for you, and it's that kind of thinking that I plan to write about.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm looking forward to that. Okay, and you're also the president of the Dade City Merchants Association. How long have you been with just in total, how long have you been with the Merchants Association, even before you were president? Well,
once I bought the tea room, I became involved with the Main Street program.
Okay.
And the Merchants Association was a subcategory of that. So that was how that started. And
Okay.
so I was a part of the Main Street program,
Gotcha.
and they had absorbed the Merchants Association into that organization at that time.
And what was your motivation for getting involved?
Well, I wanted to just promote my business. Yeah,
Absolutely, yeah.
It was about, a lot of people joined the chamber. You either joined the chamber or you went with Main Street. Main Street's ideology seemed to be more in line with mine. I was about that historical preservation, small town. I believe that our small town historical assets are part of our marketing.
Yes, ma'am, for sure.
And that sort of thing. So I was more aligned with their values and their goals.
Is Main Street still there?
No, Main Street retired the charter, and that's how I happened to become the president of the Merchants Association, because we came out of that organization. We had no one at that point. I mean, we had a choice. I guess we could have joined the chamber, and the chamber was always very supportive, always done everything they could to help all of us. But I really felt like it was an opportunity. Again, I go back to that, wanting to do it yourself,
Yeah.
be in charge of your own destiny.
Yes, ma'am.
So I talked with the other folks that were there at the time, and I went to the city commission, and Main Street had been receiving a $25,000 a year stipend from the city for marketing and that sort of thing. And I said, let us do it. And they did. And that's how it came about.
Okay, awesome. What do you like most about being involved with the Merchants Association?
I like the creative aspect, creating different events, different campaigns.
Sure.
Trying to analyze. I'm still back on that problem-solving, mystery-solving thing.
Yeah.
What motivates people to come to town? What do they want to see when they get here?
Yeah.
Making a science out of that study.
Yep.
That's what I like best.
So how can a fellow merchant in the area, how can they get involved? So they want to get involved, they're just not sure how. How do they get involved in the Merchants Association?
Well, they come to the meetings and basically just put their oar in the water, so to speak, and get involved.
And when are the meetings?
The general meeting is the first Thursday of each month
Okay.
at 8:30 in the morning.
Okay.
And we just recently switched our meeting location over to the Chamber of Commerce boardroom.
Okay.
And so they come to the meeting, get involved. They can join one of the committees. The event committee is one that meets every week, and that committee kind of plans the events, hashes out the verbiage, the advertising, and the plan.
Yes, ma'am.
And so they can get involved and just be part of the community.
Sure.
We have no membership dues. It's open to anyone that's in the downtown. And we have people that are not merchants that are friends of merchants of the promotion of the day city downtown that are there at our meetings. So it's not limited to, you don't have to have a business to be there.
Understood. Okay, fantastic. All right, Margaret. So let's now shift a little bit. Let's start talking about the Angel Tea Room and Heavenly Treasures gift shop. Okay. Now, I believe you purchased the Angel Tea Room, was it in 2013?
No, it was in 2007.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha. Perfect. What's the story behind how you acquired the tea room?
Well, again, being influenced by what I read and what I see. Always looking for that challenge and that adventure. I love telling this story to people. I get the question a lot, and I get a kick out of being able to tell it. It all began with one evening during the holiday season. I was sitting at home watching TV, and Martha Stewart and Miss Piggy were baking cookies. And of course, I had no idea who Martha Stewart was up until that very moment. I did know Miss Piggy, but I didn't know Martha. But anyway, and Martha was talking about various different homemaking things and so forth. And I have a side of me that had now grown into the appreciation of antiques and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Let me learn more about Martha Stewart, since she seems to be of a similar mindset. So I started watching her programs, and teacups came into play, and antiques and dishware and that sort of thing. So that kind of got me going in that direction. And then I had a friend that I met who told me about having tea parties in the backyard with her children when they were small, and we became friends on the basis of teacups, and we would go around to antique shops and shop for cups and things like that. And of course, you can't have a teacup without finding a tea room. So we would have lunch at the Angell Tea Room. A lot of people think that it was named after me, but it wasn't. It was the Angell Tea Room long before I came on the scene. But anyway, we would go there, have lunch, have tea. I didn't know very much about tea. It didn't start off with my love for tea. It started off with my appreciation for beautiful tea cups and teapots and that sort of thing. And then, of course, I liked the gentility that was associated with that lifestyle. It was quite a contrast to the other side of my world, where you dealt with unpleasant or things that were not really pleasant parts of life. So anyway, the tea room went on the market for sale, and so I took the plunge. We actually took the plunge together, and she worked there for a while and then decided to move away and be closer to her grandchildren. So then I ended up with it as the sole owner. And in the beginning, we had a staff because we both had careers. We didn't give up our careers to go work at the tea room in the beginning.
Oh, wow, okay.
So we had a staff, we had a manager, and then later on, as circumstances developed, we became more and more involved in the day-to-day operations.
Gotcha. So you were still doing the PI firm?
Still running the PI agency.
Gotcha. Wow,
Yeah.
okay. And this was just a thing you were doing on the side.
I like to tell people it was my retirement investment, but it's turned out to be more like having a kid in college. You keep working to support it.
Yeah.
But that's not always true, but it used to be in the beginning. That it's been fun.
Yes, ma'am. Awesome. Okay, now, speaking of tea, do you know what the perfect pairing is with a nice cup? Lanky Lassie shortbread, of course. If you haven't tried this delicious treat, it's a must. Right next door to Angell's Tea Room and Heavenly Treasures is one of Dade City's most popular destinations. Lanky Lassie Shortbread Shop is nestled in the heart of historic downtown Dade City and offers a unique experience for all of its patrons. Lanky Lassie's uses only the finest all-natural ingredients to carry on this handed-down family tradition. This crusty-edged, soft-centered buttery cookie will crumble in your mouth, leaving you smiling and begging for more. Order online, ships nationwide, or visit their local storefront in downtown Dade City. Give the perfect gift today, llshortbread.com. All right, so now you were working, and I find this intriguing. So you were doing law enforcement, you were doing private investigation, and then you just decided we're going to do the restaurant business. It's something you had never done before.
That is true. It is something I had never done. My mother was in the restaurant business her entire adult life. But no, I didn't know what I was doing at all.
Right. And you've been there now for 15 plus years,
Right.
Which in and of itself is an impressive stat, but you're doing it in the restaurant industry. And from my experience, having talking to other restaurant owners, most of them fail within the first 2 or 3 years. I'm just going to do it. And you've been there for 15 plus years. Margaret, how did you learn how to get the food, the inventory, licensing, accounting? I'm sure it's a whole different world. How did you learn all that stuff?
Well, running the agency, being the administrator of the detective agency, you became quite familiar with accounting practices and licensing, because we would do investigations that would require us to look into licensing and so forth.
Okay.
Now I'll mention that my former partner had been a health inspector at one point in her life in a different state, so she had a little insight into that area. And of course we were buying an existing operating business, and we had a staff that was there. My partner took a couple of weeks and worked with the previous owner just to kind of get familiar.
Gotcha.
So we didn't just throw back the doors and say, here we are. So we were a little bit
Okay.
sensible about how because we knew we didn't know what we didn't know.
Sure.
Which, by the way, when we get to tips, that's the biggest problem. Most people fail in business is you don't know what you don't know,
Right.
and you don't stay there long enough to start to figure it out.
Right.
But anyway, and it was just a lot of stuff was just learning by doing. I worked in my kitchen. And I would see systems and procedures and things of that sort that we could do differently, more efficiently. I'll take that investigative mind and apply it to this.
Sure.
Because I would always, if we were doing things a certain way, I would study it and I would say, why are we doing it this way?
Yeah.
Is this the most effective, most efficient?
Yep.
Whatever. So it was a process.
Sure.
And I read about teas. I knew nothing about teas. Absolutely zero about teas.
Yeah.
When we started.
Yeah.
So I would read and learn and.
So you just jumped into the deep end. I'm just going to figure this out.
Well, that's what you have to do, really. If you find yourself in a situation, you just have to figure out how to acquire the knowledge that you don't have when you took the leap.
Yeah.
And I think people miss that a lot of times.
Yeah.
But I think that what really has served me very well was a combination of things. Number one, the investigative, inquiring mindset, the analytical mindset that goes with investigating. You've got to take what you know and try to figure out what you don't know. So that becomes, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun to do that. Mm-hmm. So I think that was a lot of what has motivated me through the years, and it's plus I read motivational materials.
What do you read?
Well, I love Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I find that each year of my life that I go back and read that, I learn more from it because I didn't know maybe the year before something, and I reflect. I do a lot of reflective thinking. I do a lot of writing. I mean, I absorb things that I read by making copious notes and really drilling down into the meaning of something.
Sure. Yeah.
But
okay. Do you have a mentor, someone you can sort of lean on for advice and ask these "how do I" questions? And did you have someone like that?
No, I not really.
Okay.
I've had many people who have been in my camp as far as encouraging me. My grandmother was an incredibly strong woman. I spent the first 8 years of my life with her. She died when I was 13, but she was a tremendous role model for strength and perseverance. She was deaf. We'd been hit by an automobile way back in the day. We started off in rural East Tennessee, and she lived alone, even though she was deaf. Everybody in the community knew that if you came to call on her, you'd better carry a lantern or something so she could see who you were, because if you didn't, she was liable to shoot you. And she was my first inspiration for being a strong woman.
Love it.
I'll tell you one quick little story, and this set me, I think this has been something that I've relied on throughout my adulthood. Going to school at the farm that we lived on, there was a gate at the entrance to the property, and then another gate when you got into the part where the house was, and because we had chickens in the inmost. We were not the type of people that wanted chickens on the front porch. But anyway, there was a rooster, and I was like in the first grade. And this rooster was probably about, to me, as a first grader, he seemed like he was 10 foot tall. But he was almost as tall as I was. And this guy would be, and I'd go to school and come back alone. You didn't have parents walking you to school and so forth. Anyway, this rooster would be waiting for me at the first gate, and he would chase me all the way to the second gate, with me running for my life. And it just terrified me.
Yeah.
And I remember my grandmother saying, "Now, honey, if you'll just pick up a rock and throw it at him, he won't bother you again. Well, as a child, I took her at her word, so I got my rock. I entered the gate one day with my rock in hand, and here he comes. I mean, he never missed a day. He was there faithfully. You see folks waiting for the school bus to come. This rooster waited for me every day after school. But anyway, so I had the rock, and I threw it. No aim, just pure panic. Out of fear, threw the rock, hit him in the head, and killed him. Oh. Well, after that, the rooster became symbolic for me, that anytime there was a difficult challenge, I knew that all I had to do was pick up a rock, not figuratively, of course, not literally, and overcome the challenge. Mm-hmm. So I used to wear a little rooster on my lapel as a reminder that whatever challenge you face in life, there's the rooster story.
Yeah.
You can overcome it. But my grandmother was really a tremendous inspiration for me as far as becoming a strong personality. And of course, my mother was always afraid that I was doing something foolish, but she was always very proud after I had done it, but she was a little apprehensive when I was about to do it.
Sure.
I remember one time I did a traffic stop in her neighborhood, and she's out there, and I'm thinking, okay, I got two things to deal with: the guy that I've stopped, and my mother, who I'm afraid is going to interfere to try to help me out. Talk about having your mother as your backup here, but anyway.
I love it. So, Margaret, what about funding? So, and I ask everybody this question, it just kind of helps to paint the full picture. So, you decided to purchase the Angell Tea Room. So, did you have a bunch of money saved up? Did you take out loans? I mean, how did you go about it?
No, I had some commercial property that I had acquired, and I sold a unit and used that money.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. I understand. Now, were you nervous? So you were going from law enforcement, private investigation to a completely new field. I mean, were you a little bit scared that it wasn't going to work out, or were you just confident, I'm going to do this, I'm going to figure it out, and we're going to be successful?
Well, I was thinking about the rooster,
Yeah.
No, I really didn't feel like I was going from one thing to another. I was just incorporating different components into my life, into the area of things that I enjoyed.
Yes, ma'am. So you were taking skills you already acquired, you're going to put them over here and just learn some new skills at the same time.
Exactly.
I get it.
Yeah.
So now, what type of teas do you guys offer? Are there any special brands, flavors, types?
Yeah, at the present time, we have over 137 different teas that we have in our inventory. Teas basically fall into several small categories. There's black tea, green tea, white tea. There's the rooibos, which is called the red tea, but it's not technically from the tea bush itself. It's more like an herbal. And then, of course, we have the herbals.
Okay, gotcha.
And then everything else kind of goes from there.
What's some of the most popular kinds? You have out of the 137, are there one that sell better than the other?
Yeah, we have two that are very popular. One is called Polar Fire. It's a rooibos tea, which basically is from the red bush that grows only in South Africa. Has probably better antioxidants than the green teas, but not as widely known.
Okay.
But it's naturally decaffeinated, not chemically processed to remove caffeine, which is a plus. Polar Fire is an orange marzipan. It's our number one tea.
Okay.
Our second one is also a rooibos, and it's called Creamsicle. And it's patterned after the ice cream, Creamsicle. It's an orange vanilla.
Yeah.
Now we have some serious teas. We have the Earl Grey, English Breakfast, the Psalms, Buckingham Palace. Those serious teas that appeal to the purist.
Sure. Okay.
And then we have a lot of flavored black teas, which the average palate seems to prefer.
Gotcha. Okay. And I've seen on your menu that you also you have salads and sandwiches and wraps and soup. So what all is on your menu there?
Yeah, all of those things. Plus we do what's called traditional afternoon tea. A lot of people want to call it high tea, which technically is not the correct terminology. It's just become a normal usage of the term. traditional afternoon tea is what they're referring to. It's the 3-tier with the finger sandwiches and the petite desserts.
Okay.
High tea is technically a full meal. So if you're having high tea in the English standards, you're eating, meat and potatoes and a pot of tea, that kind of thing.
Sure.
But traditional afternoon tea is what the queen might have in the afternoon to entertain some friends or that sort of thing. And then those are petite desserts.
Understood.
The other thing, too, is I think sometimes people think high tea meaning of a higher fanciness or something like that, and that's not it at all. It actually goes the other way.
Gotcha.
High tea gets its name from the table.
Understood.
It's a high table, a dinner table.
Okay, gotcha. Now, and you also had your gift shop there as well. I've actually I've bought several of your Coca-Cola puzzles. It's for my mom. She's a big Coke collector. It was her birthday and Mother's Day. She loved them, by the way.
Oh.
So what types of gift items do you have in your store?
Well, we have anything I can find that is tea related. I try to bring in, simply because some of it has novelty value. People like to buy little things that pertain to tea to give to their friends. Mm-hmm. We have some beautiful, beautiful cards that are prepared by Kimberly Shaw that has great artwork of teacups on the front, and it also includes a bag of tea inside. And they're crafted for various occasions, that sort of thing. So we have tea cozies that are locally handmade, and I try to support our local artists anytime I can.
Sure.
So we've got a number of things. I have a little thing called Tea Wallet. That's a little cloth pouch that you can take your teas with you when you go someplace other than the tea room.
Yeah.
Or you can take sugars. A lot of people have specialty sugars that they like. And we also sell specialty sugars.
Okay.
We have lavender sugar and various different kinds of sugar.
Okay. So if people wanted to come in to buy tea to take and make it at home, they could do it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We have our teas that we brew are also available for sale.
Perfect. Okay. Margaret, how large is your staff? Do you have a lot of people there to help you out? Or?
I do not at the present time. The staff numbers, like any other business, especially in this period of time, will fluctuate. But in the summer, we go down to a smaller staff because we have less need for a large staff.
Sure.
And then, of course, in what we call the season, it expands a bit.
Okay.
But we only have, three people running it.
Sure.
I mean, ideally, if you're busy, you need 5. You need somebody in the gift shop to cashier and to handle the gift shop, the dining room, and I like having somebody to brew tea.
Sure.
Because we do what we call 2 feature teas a day, and we actually pre-brew those in the morning and keep them in the hot pots for immediate service. But with 138 teas, people don't want to be limited to 2 teas sometimes.
Yeah.
So if you're really busy, it's nice to have somebody back there brewing the teas.
Sure.
And then, of course, you can always use 2 people in the kitchen.
Yes, ma'am.
We make almost all of our stuff. It's either semi-made from a commercial product that's made into our recipe, or it's made completely from scratch.
Gotcha.
So
where do you go about? So when it is in season, where do you go about finding people to good people to hire?
Well, word of mouth sometimes. Sometimes we'll stick a sign in the window.
Gotcha. So just basic advertising,
Just basic,
stuff like
yeah,
that.
nothing,
Gotcha.
nothing out.
Anything online, anything like that, or have you tried those?
I have. I find that I get a lot of applicants sometimes, but not necessarily that are a good fit for what we're looking for.
Sure, gotcha. I hear that a lot. Yeah, I was just curious how you go about it. Okay, so when you first bought the tea room, did you guys have to do any sort of marketing and advertising, or was it relatively already established and you just use the existing word of mouth, or how did you go about that?
How did I go from the starting point to where we are now?
Yes, ma'am.
We've not done a lot of advertising. We should have done more, but advertising, of course, is expensive.
Sure.
We did a lot of modifications. I expanded the menu, did a lot of physical renovation to the tea room itself. When I first got there, you plug in 2 tea kettles and the breaker would pop. So I had to spend a lot of money putting in electrical boxes and circuits that could handle running 3 or 4 tea kettles at a time. The question again was how did we grow the business?
Yes,
basically?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Basically, what the business has grown basically from word of mouth, I think, and reputation, which of course word of mouth creates the reputation. I do my own waitressing now. I didn't for a long time. It was just one of those things that I wasn't comfortable with. But I got comfortable with it when I, needed to, and I find that I enjoy it because, again, going back to the investigative mindset, it allows me to determine how my guests are interacting with the menu, with the food, whether they're, I observe. I'm constantly alert, looking for any kind of feedback that tells me whether or not they're having a good time, whether they're enjoying their food, or if I see that something is being left too many times, I want to find out why.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I'm always alert to try to figure out what's going on.
Sure.
And being the server gets me right on the front line.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Okay, and so that's how you grew it from beginning
that's how
to here.
we certainly need to do more advertising because especially at this point in time when we have so many new people moving into the area. I'm getting calls from people that are just mainly saying, I've heard a lot about your place. I want to make a reservation.
Gotcha. And their word of mouth is how they're hearing about it.
And it's coming. So we've been at it long enough that.
Yes, ma'am. And so present day advertising is something you talked about, maybe want to get a little more into, but you're not doing a whole lot right now.
We're really not doing any right now.
Gotcha. Understood. Okay. And so what about future plans for the tea room and the gift shop? Do you have anything big coming, new menu items, upcoming sales? Anything like that?
Yeah, I'm completely revamping the menu. Unfortunately, this doesn't speak highly of me as a business person, but I've been very, you get so busy doing stuff that you don't always have time to deal with the important stuff. But we're still on menu process from probably 6-7 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And the rest of the world has not made that mistake. So I am in the process of revamping our menu. We've got to make some price increases,
sure.
Unfortunately. And we have a lot of items that we use in different ways that are not on the menu.
Okay.
Things that are on the afternoon tea that you couldn't order as a lunch. And I want to make those available because it's, the more efficient you can become with your food products, the better your business operates. It affects the bottom line. So you're not throwing things away that you can use in other ways.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, perfect. Now, and you told me you still do a couple of cases per year with your PI business.
Yeah, I'll do a little bit. I serve a lot of court documents.
Yeah.
That's pretty cut and dried. I still am a certified or a special process server for the county, to the sheriff. And so I do that. As a matter of fact, I'll be out doing that later this afternoon after this interview.
Okay.
But that's something I can fit in around my other hours. But right now, most of my time is spent dealing with the tea room or merchants.
Okay, awesome. Okay, now, Margaret, I ask everybody this question because I just want to hear you talk about it a little bit. Why Dade City, right? What is it? So you live here, you have your business here, you settled down here, you're the president of the Merchants Association here. What is it about Dade City that you just love so much?
Well, of course, I didn't choose Dade City. When I moved here, I was brought here by family members. But I grew up here. I love Dade City. I am a strong proponent of Dade City. And I believe that Dade City now possesses attributes that could make it a very thriving tourist destination. Because we still have that old charm that Andy Griffith, I used to hear people compare it to Mayberry in a derogatory way, but now we're Mayberry in a positive way, because that lifestyle is gone for the most part. I mean, it's still in pockets throughout the country, but people are looking for something different from the shopping malls. They want that genuine, authentic feeling, and Dade City has that. Mm-hmm. And I work very hard in my capacity as the Merchants Association president to try to preserve that. I lobby the city. I lobby everybody that I can. As a matter of fact, Mary Catherine from Lincoln Lassie and I've talked Madonna Wise into putting together a historical tour for the downtown. I mean, we've had one that was on Church Street, which we have our beautiful historical homes, but no one has been telling the story about the buildings. Our buildings have been there for many, many years, and they have a history and a story, and people are interested in that. Mm-hmm. So I will probably stay with Dade City until, I don't know, maybe once I decide to finally retire and write, I will consider moving away, maybe back to Tennessee to a mountain cabin, only because the environment is conducive to writing and that sort of thing. But other than that, it's Dade City for me.
Gotcha. And yeah, that project with Mary Catherine, Madonna, Jervis Wise here, I actually might get involved with you guys on that. So just as a little bit of inside information there with somebody to help with the filming and things.
Yeah, great.
So you seem to have no aversion at all to taking a risk and starting down a path that you've never been down before. And again, I'm gonna quote Madonna Jervis Wise from her book, Trailblazing Women of Tampa Bay. You're a true trailblazer who provides a modern day inspiration for girls seeking non-traditional careers. Mm-hmm. Margaret, can you just talk for a moment about what it means to be a trailblazer?
Well, I'll start by saying I never intended to be a trailblazer. That was not my motivation. My motivation was to do what Margaret wanted to do, and not be limited by what society said Margaret could do or what she couldn't do. And I think that, we're in a period of time now that there are not a lot of careers that women are not welcomed in. So we've crossed that bridge, so to speak. So we're on the other side. But I think that now it becomes a personal development choice for people, be it female or male. You've got to decide what you want to do, and then you've got to make up your mind that you're going to do it, that failure is really not an option. I always say success is a choice. You can decide that you're going to succeed, or you can just wither it away and give up. You don't fail, you just give up. So I've always been a very persistent person. I mean, I still have socks that are 20 years old, I don't get rid of things, I keep things. But I'm a persistent person. And so I'm not going to throw in the towel if I can see a way to succeed. And I think that's what people need to learn, because I see too many people quit too early. Mm-hmm. Business goes through a cycle. You open a new business, everybody's talking about you. It used to be the newspaper reporter ran down, took your picture, wrote a story about you, got you some publicity, everybody read the story, they came down to check you out. And then you thought, okay, we're off and running. And then it happens. Nothing happens. They all forget because there's some new story somewhere else. And then you think, okay, this isn't going to work. I sat for months waiting for the telephone to ring when I started my PI agency, because not only was I the first female PI person in town, but I was the first PI. I had to train these attorneys that they needed an investigator. Now, fortunately, I had high visibility from being in law enforcement and being involved with court cases, so they knew me in that respect. But they didn't yet know that they needed their own investigator. But I would I'd pick up the phone ever so often and make sure it was still working. Of course, that was before we got into cell phones, but you've got to be willing to stay with it and analyze constantly. Why isn't it working? What can I do? What do I need to do? What do I not know? You can't just put your open sign in the door and wait.
Yes, ma'am.
But you better not put the close sign in there too early and run away.
Correct. That's such a good answer. And you've said this repeatedly, that you're the type of person who just wants to start your own thing. There are people out there who and I was one of them. I worked for many, many years in a past life for somebody else, and it just seemed natural. Go to college, get a degree, go get a job, work for somebody else. But you have just always been, I'm going to do my own. I'm going to create the business. I'm going to do my own thing. Yeah. And so you're a very interesting person. You have a lot of success. You're the trailblazer. You're a role model. I mean, if you had an aspiring entrepreneur, someone came to you and they said, I'm inspired by your story and your experiences and your success in life, what advice would you give to someone, a young aspiring entrepreneur? They're looking at you with the bright-eyed and starry face, and what advice would you have for someone like that?
Well, my first thing would be identify that one thing that you really want to do. You've got to do that, because you can't do what somebody else wants you to do. It's got to be what you have a passion for. My passion was that investigative thing that was awakened by the Hardy Boy, Nancy Drew stuff. So you've got to identify that. You've got to know what that is. Then you've got to go. The next step is figure out, how do I go from here, where I am now, to where I want to be. And then you've got to just say, burn the bridges and go. Because if you allow yourself an easy escape, when it gets rough, and it will get rough, I guarantee you, It will get rough. That phone won't ring for months, and you'll keep wondering. You'll second guess yourself, and you'll think, well, did I do the right? Should I have stayed with my paying job, my benefits job that everybody told me?
Right.
That people came to me the night that I was leaving and said, do you know what you're doing? Do you want to think about this? I've thought about it. Think about it, but make your commitment to it. And then you figure out how to make it work.
Right.
Not if it will work, but how.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you make it work? Yeah. And you pay attention to what you're doing and what you're not doing, and then you put it together that way.
Sure. And so you've touched on, and it's absolutely correct, there are peaks and valleys, there are good times, and it's usually right in the beginning you get that little pop, and then things die out a little bit, and you're kind of down here wondering, well, did I make the right choice? So during those turbulent times, how do you stay confident and focused that, I am doing the right thing, I just have to get through this rough patch?
Well, I think you stay busy trying to figure out what you should be doing instead of worrying about what's not happening. And in the restaurant business, you can't worry so much about why the people are not coming per se. You've got to think about, what do I need to do to make the people come?
Sure.
So you've got to stay involved and engaged. And if you have that and again, back to Napoleon Hill and Think We're Rich, that burning passion, you've got to know, when you make the choice, you've got to know that was the choice you wanted to make. So now the only thing left is figuring out how to bring it about.
It's your mindset.
Is keep your mind on it, figure it out.
Yeah.
If this, Edison would have never produced the light bulb if he'd have given up on, 897th try.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You've got to keep at it. You've got to keep going back and saying, okay, I've done this, I've done that. What have I done? How could I adjust what I do? I do the same thing with the Merchants Association with events. What did we do that worked? What did we do that didn't work? What can we change that change the outcome the next time we do it?
Yes, ma'am.
And you keep doing that.
Yes, ma'am.
And eventually you hit on the right combination.
Right. Yeah. Just keep trying, make adjustments, try things, do what worked, do that again. What didn't work, scrap it, and just keep evolving.
And gather your intelligence. Interact, pay attention to what's going on.
Yeah.
And then you can make your adjustments.
So Margaret, with everything you have going on, do you have any sort of relief valves? How do you kind of step back and kind of release the stress and just not let everything just topple down on top of you?
Well, I do deal with a lot of stress. There are times that I probably don't deal with it as well as I'd like to. But I find that the writing comes in there. Yeah.
So what about, and you touched on Think and Grow Rich, but are there any other good books you're reading, podcasts you're listening to, and movies you watch, anything like that?
I mean, I have probably a page of 100 different titles of books that I've read.
Anything recent that you recommend somebody else to?
I'm one of those, I'll read a little in this one, a little in that one. So I may have 5 books going at the same time.
Sure.
I'm trying to think of something that
maybe movies or podcast. Do you listen to other podcasts at all? Have you ventured down that road?
I do some, but usually I'm listening to the lectures of the old guys.
Sure. Yeah.
I find that
that's fine.
A lot of the wisdom hasn't changed. We may have changed the way we deliver the message, but the message hasn't changed.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm reading a very interesting book right now. It's called The Laws of Prosperity, I think, and it's by Catherine Ponder, if I recall correctly. I had never heard of Catherine Ponder before, and I just accidentally ran across it at our local used bookstore. And, of course, things like that always catch my eye. And I bought the book, and I've started reading it. It has a lot of the same theories and applications that Napoleon Hill has, with a biblical influence.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm a strong believer in our subconscious mind and how we can accomplish things. In the power of positive thinking, I like Norman Vincent Peale and his thought. Mm-hmm. I've read Dale Carnegie. When I watch a movie, I usually take away something from the movie, even though it's not necessarily a business or educational movie.
Sure.
But there's some aspect of a lesson, a life lesson there or something.
Yes, ma'am.
So there will be something that I will dote on afterwards, and I usually end up bending somebody's ear about it if they've watched the same movie. Did you notice? I'm very fond of the Downton Abbey series and the society and the way they set the table that influences me in the tea room, because there's that order that things fall into.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
Surprisingly enough, people don't realize that when you have a picture that's a little bit off center or the frame needs adjusting, they don't know why that bothers them, but they know that it does.
Sure.
The same thing applies to a table setting, because if you put the table setting a little out of kilter, it gives you an unaware but an uneasy subconscious feeling, so you're not going to be as relaxed. Something's off. You may not pinpoint it. You may not even make a conscious awareness of it, but it's there.
Yes, ma'am.
So I pick up things like that, and I'm thinking, okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
I can incorporate that.
Yeah.
But
okay, I love it. That's so good. All right, well, Margaret, we're going to kind of start winding this thing down a little bit. Are there any topics that we didn't cover that you'd like to talk about, or a topic that we did cover that you want to talk a little more about?
Well, the only thing that I could add to what we've talked about, and I've jumped all over the map here, is that I think that people can succeed at anything that they make up their mind to succeed at. And I would like to see more people have the courage and the fortitude to do that, because we have too much failure that goes on out there, and it's unnecessary. People will squander their life savings. We talk about this at some of the merchant meetings or at co-op meetings that I have with the chamber. People will invest their life savings in a business, and they'll run through it, but they won't stay with it long enough to make it pay off. Mm-hmm. Or they haven't done their research going into it so that the money can outlive the learning curve. Mm-hmm. I've seen that happen in so many businesses in Dade City, so many. And it doesn't have to be that way. You have to be prepared to be in it for the long haul. And I think if we were talking about advice, if I had advice to give to people, that's what I would say. Be prepared to run for the long haul. Don't get scared. I got scared when I had the PI thing. I almost took a job as airport security person just to fill in. I wasn't abandoning, but I thought, well, I've still got bills to pay. It didn't come to that. I went for an interview, and and by the time I got back home, my phone was ringing with cases.
Nice.
So that's the way life works.
Yes, ma'am.
It takes you right up to that point, that cliff, and you think you're going to fall off, but you don't.
Yeah.
Most people turn and run. You can't do that.
Yes, ma'am.
That's what I would say.
Love it. Okay. All right. So we're going to end this with what I call my 3 quick question round. I just have 3 final quick questions for you. Question number 1, how would you define the word entrepreneur?
Well, I mean, I know what the textbook definition is. My definition is a little bit more convoluted. I would just simply say anybody that's brave enough to jump out there and start a business of some sort.
Yes, ma'am.
And I know entrepreneurs usually go from one business to another. They get their thrill out of just starting. To me, I want to stay with it a little bit longer than start it and turn it over. But that's how I would define it.
Perfect. So question number 2, how would you define the word success?
Being happy with what you've accomplished. And success is a past tense type thing. You never know. You've had success until it's over with, and then you can look back.
Yeah.
Tell them.
So final question. Question number 3, how would you define the word happiness?
Doing what you love doing.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, perfect. So, Margaret, how can people find you? We've talked about your website, but plug it again. Any social media stuff, different events, sales you have going on, phone number, just plug all of your stuff.
Well, right now we're in the process of creating a new website, so that's not really functional at the moment. We do have a Facebook page, The Angell Tea Room. I can never remember our phone number. The previous owner set it up. It spells love.
Okay.
518-LOVE, whatever
Okay.
that turns into. Always have to look at our business card. Oh, what's our phone number? But and they can always drop by the tea room. You know, we come by. I'll treat you to a cup of tea and let you sample some of the teas that we have.
What are the hours you're open?
We're open Wednesday through Saturday from 11 to 3:30.
Make appointments, reservations?
Reservations if you have more than 4 people in your party, and definitely if you want that afternoon tea, you want to have a reservation because we'll give you a special table setting, and it does take a bit of time to prepare all the little petite sandwiches and desserts, and we customize it. So if you have dietary issues, whatever, we work around those. And I like to encourage people to just come in, try it, and have the experience. It's one of those things that it's not just about having a meal. It's about having an experience.
Sure.
It's an interact. I tell people sometimes it's a sip, it's a bite, it's conversation.
Yes, ma'am.
So bring somebody that you love, somebody you'd like to get to know, and have a cup of tea.
Fantastic.
And a lunch.
Awesome. Well, Margaret, thanks a lot for being here. This has been fantastic. And everyone else, thanks a lot for tuning in. If you've enjoyed the show, just please share it around. The best way for new listeners to find us is for our current listeners to talk about us. So give us a like, drop us a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Follow us over on Facebook at TAOB Podcast. Please don't forget to support our sponsors, Lanky Lassie Shortbread. Order online, ships nationwide, lshortbread.com, and Reliable Resellers. If you're looking to downsize, call the pros at Reliable Resellers, 813-421-5676, or visit them online at reliableresellers.net. I'm your host, Eric Baker, and this has been another episode of The Art of Business. Bye for now.